Ladies and gentlemen, you ever get excited for a video game and then it comes out and boy oh boy, the launch absolutely ruins its reputation in a matter of hours? Yeah, that's what I'm like with the Callisto protocol. Now, I feel like I'm the only person in the world that seems like they're actually enjoying this game or they've enjoyed it. I've actually just finished it like an hour ago. And to give you an idea of how quick the game is, I finished it in around 7 hours and like 15 minutes, okay? I guess if that's what the actual in-game timer is to be believed. Now, that seems really short, and it is. Because, when it comes to survival horror games, I usually just one-shot my way through these. I've done it for games like Silent Hill 2, I've done it for games like Resident Evil. Anytime you give me a survival horror game, I'm gonna be there from the beginning to the end in basically one sitting. But see, where the key difference is games like Dead Space or Resident Evil, there's a key focus on replaying the game to unlock newer items, or constantly go through runs at higher difficulties to, again, unlock more and more things. You don't get the same in Callisto Protocol. Once you see the credit screen, it's over. There's no New Game Plus, which might be added in a later patch, and there's just nothing else aside from the main campaign. Now, of course, that's just me doing it. I'm sure for people who are a little bit new to survival horror stuff, your playtime might get up to like 11, 12 hours. This is not a long game, okay? I'm just putting that one out there. So if your idea is, do I get enough bang for 60 bucks? Wait for a sale. Wait for 50% off. Wait for something, okay? Wait for a Steam sale. Wait for a sale on the PlayStation, Xbox store. You get it. Now, I want to just get off the positive, so to speak. Now, I like this game a lot, okay? And I like Dead Space, all right? Dead Space is some of the best horror game franchise action that I've ever gotten into. Dead Space, if you've never played it, Dead Space 1, Dead Space 2, and we'll include Dead Space 3 into it just because, it's part of the trilogy. Dead Space 1, 2, and 3 are horror games that basically take place, of course, in space, on ships, in closed environments, okay? And in these environments consist of various enemies. Now, in Dead Space, these enemies have various appendages, and it's up to you to strategically shoot these appendages, fight them in absolutely logical ways, okay? When you get into an encounter in Dead Space against an enemy type, you have to identify the enemy type, you have to identify what weapon works well, what fire mode you need to be using, and how to dismember these enemies. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be dying a lot or you're going to be burning through your resources. And in a survival horror game, that's the last thing you want. Now, of course, one of the things that I love about Dead Space is the idea of immersive HUDs, okay? Now, I love immersive games, but Dead Space takes it to the nth degree. This is a period in single-player gaming, the Xbox 360, PS3 generation, where they actually strive for less HUD elements. Now, Dead Space is one of those games where your health indicator, your, O2 indicators, your, telekinetic indicators, your weapon indicators are all readily apparent on the actual equipment. So, for instance, on your back, there's going to be a health bar. That health bar, you can directly see, correlates to different colors. Blue for good, yellow for caution, red for find a health kit. Then your weapon ammunition, okay? You see it on the actual firearm. Now, of course, it's these little touches that make the game just that much more immersive. And for a horror game, that's pretty much all you need. It reminds me of games like Mirror's Edge, where they don't even give you gun counts. They don't even give you, ammunition counts on guns that you're holding. Because I want you to be that immersed into the situation. This is a period of gaming that I wish we kind of got a return to. And you kind of get it with Callisto Protocol. This game is pretty much what Dead Space is. Now, when it comes to the UI, same thing. There are literally no objective indicators in this game either. You're pretty much relegated to exploring the entire area and finding the next location for yourself. Now, that being said, it works really well because Callisto Protocol's level design is all the way there. Visually, this might be one of the best games that I've ever seen. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm a man of ultra-high graphic settings, and this game does it all. Visually, the art design is there. The ray tracing is probably some of the best implementations that I've ever seen done on a game, period. Sound design is there. The level design is there. You've got character rendering that is beyond anything that I've seen so far. And of course, when it comes to the gore and the combat, the game is there. Kind of. Now, of course, while it visually looks good, the storyline was decent, and I'm generally excited for a Callisto Protocol 2 because I found the story to be fun. The actual gameplay can be a bit frustrating. For instance, the combat in the game is easily broken when you have like 2 or 3 individuals on screen at once. Now, the way that this game works is it's very melee-oriented, meaning that in order for you to fight, you have to dodge enemies first. The dodge mechanic works like this. Imagine you have a controller, right? Now, there is no dodge timing. No. You have to hold the analog left or right as the enemy is attacking you at any given time, and you will immediately dodge. Now, the enemies can have follow-up attacks like 1-2 punches, so every time you get dodge left, for instance, you have to immediately flick the stick back and forth like this. So left, right, left, right, left, right. And then once you have an opening, you can either do a heavy attack with the R1 button or a light attack with the R2 button. Never do a fucking heavy attack. The game prefers that you do a light attack. Eventually, if you hit them enough, you can aim your weapon down and blow some brains out, okay? Strategically target them. The game is definitely easy the more you play it, okay? It definitely gets easier. When it comes to this combat system, it was so frustrating that in the beginning of the game, I just kept dying over and over and over again. I thought I was sucking, and I really was. It was an actual skill issue. Towards the end of the game, I was dodging left, right, left, right, left, right, beating almost every enemy. And by the end of the game, you have so many weapons, and you can basically craft as much ammunition as you need that you don't even need to engage in melee combat. You can just get an assault rifle, print like 200 rounds of ammunition, and go to town on any enemy that comes at you. That's just where the game ends up going. Now, that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's one of the key issues that the game has. And alongside all of it, we're going to jump now into the technical issues that have absolutely ruined this game's launch. Now, if you're playing on the PS5 like I am, this is the best version to play at the moment, because it has all the features intact, and frame rate wise, it's not erratic. For some reason, the Xbox One and the Xbox Series X, the Series X and S, have some frame rate issues. For instance, even on the Xbox Series X, all of the ray tracing features aren't even available like they are on the PlayStation 5. And, of course, when it comes to the frame rate, the Xbox Series X version goes below 30 frames a fair bit. Now, I've heard that there's about 150 developers that worked on this from Sony, but they were mostly working in the motion capture department. I don't believe this was intentionally sabotaged. I think that there is definitely a problem in some capacity with how the Xbox version is running, and it can be fixed, hopefully with patches down the road. Now, beyond just those technical issues, the game has a 60 frame mode, but the reason I didn't pick with it is that the 60 frame mode gets rid of the ray tracing, which really does make the game look a lot better. And also, the 60 frames isn't entirely 60 frames. On the PS5, I've seen it go down, I swear to God, as low as 30. So you're playing a game that goes from 30 to 60 frames, all right? And if you've ever played video games with erratic frame rates like that and no form of like a VRR or like any form of like a variable refresh rates, it's not fun. And especially when the frame rate gets so low that even variable refresh rates don't end up fixing it. There's no 40 hertz option. There's literally nothing for this game. So in my opinion, play to 30 frames, at least it's more consistent there, as hard as it is to recommend that. Now, when it comes to the PC version, like we started this video off, it's gotten review bombed. Now, why is it getting review bombed? Well, apparently the PC version is fucking unplayable. Now, I hate to be saying it like that, but it really is the case. When it comes to the PC versions of these games, I stopped buying them, okay? As a PC gamer, as somebody that likes to PC game, I don't buy any PC game these days that runs on Unreal Engine 4. And there's a reason for that. Plenty of Unreal Engine 4 games in the last few years, honestly, throughout the decade, have actually been coming up with some severe shader compilation problems. So games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Elden Ring, and the Callisto Protocol come with shader pre-compilation issues. So what that means is there is a stuttering problem in the game. Now, when it comes to low frame rates, when a frame rate dips from 60 to 50, you might notice it. Some people probably might not. But when it comes to a stutter, when the game deadlocks for a few seconds to maybe sometimes half a second, no matter what, you will feel it, okay? And this problem exists between people who have the most lowest end hardware. Like, imagine if you had a Steam Deck, okay, all the way up to people that have an RTX 4090 in their system like me. No matter who you are, you will have stuttering if your shaders are not compiled. Now, of course, this issue might not be as erratic, or it might not be as noticeable. I mean, it is noticeable. It might not be as annoying if you have more and more powerful hardware. But the point is, no matter who you are, you will always have a stutter if these shaders need to compile. Now, why is it that a shader needs to compile? And this is where we're going to get a little educationally here, okay? Shaders are effectively computer programs that calculate light, darkness, color of rendering scenes, right? There's so many different shaders. You've got vertex, geometry, tessellation, mesh, ray tracing shaders, and then beyond all of these are shader variants. But the most important is the permutations. See, for every effect you can have, for every specific feature you can have on a shader, there are more permutations that get added. So for a AAA game like Callisto Protocol that looks absolutely jaw-dropping, and you can imagine they're working with some pretty heavy graphics technology, especially with Unreal Engine 4, AAA games, their shader permutations are through the roof. We're talking thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of shader permutations. Now, the more you have these shaders, right, the way that it works and the way that my researchers went into this is the pipeline. The shader compilation pipeline goes like this, okay? So you have effectively an offline compiler like DirectX Shader Compilation or GLSLC. Then you output with that a hardware agnostic bytecode. That gets loaded into the memory by the actual game engine. The game engine then creates a pipeline state object, which is a PSO. During this phase, even that driver, the GPU driver that you have, runs its own compiler and converts that bytecode we just had into its own hardware-specific variant for the actual shader cores on the hardware that you own. Now, of course, the game engine then takes the PSO into a command buffer, issues draw calls, and then the command buffer finally is then submitting it to the GPU where the final shader program, not the compilation, the actual final program gets executed. You can imagine when you have millions of these shaders and many more permutations, calling on the JIT compiler like this can cause these stutters. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you have stutters like this, the reason why, before somebody goes, but Muda, why doesn't the PlayStation or the Xbox have this? To understand, the hardware is very limited there, okay? So, for instance, how many different versions of the Xbox hardware do you have? You have the Xbox One, you have the Xbox One X, you have the Xbox Series S, and the Xbox Series X. So you have like 4 pieces of hardware there. For PlayStation, you have the PS4, the PS4 Pro, and then the PlayStation 5. And for the Nintendo consoles, you have the Switch. So you literally have limited hardware. When it comes to a developer finalizing the build for the game, they can basically pre-calculate and then ship these shaders with the actual systems so that when you install and play the games, you don't have to worry about them. They're already compiled. It's not like you have to worry about driver versions on the PlayStation 5. It's not like you have to worry about people having different PlayStation 5 hardware. Everyone has the same hardware on that device. Now, a PC has different varieties of CPUs, different RAM varieties, and of course, the most important, different GPU vendors. So again, when it comes to shaders, these have to be compiled for each specific vendor type. So for instance, AMD has its own brand of shader compiles, NVIDIA has its own brand of shaders that it can run. Then even between these different brands, you have different versions of the hardware. So for instance, RTX 4090, which I think is Ada Lovelace, is a different generation, a different architecture than Maxwell and the various previous NVIDIA GPUs that came. Same with AMD. You can imagine how hard this can get for any developer to actually think of how do I ship these shaders. There's so many different combinations. Now, some games have alleviated this issue, like Forza Horizon 5, or more importantly, Call of Duty. Call of Duty, ever since Call of Duty 2019, has actually been pre-compiling shaders every time you launch. So every time you update the game, every time you update your graphic card drivers, every time you update something on your system, it will force a shader recompilation. So effectively what it's doing is it's taking a few minutes, sometimes it can be longer than that, in the beginning of the game, the main menu, to compile all the possible shaders. So that when you actually play the game, you don't have to worry about stutters. Now you can imagine for a game like Call of Duty, where like every millisecond matters, you don't want to have stutters, period. So that's why this is very important. Now, when it comes to Callisto Protocol, a lot of people playing the game have noticed that the game stutters like a madman throughout all of it, okay? Basically what happens is the first time you play anything in a video game, you have to render a shader. The reason why Elden Ring had shader pre-compilation issues on launch was that you were loading in areas for the first time. Anytime you load in an area for the first time in a video game, you will have to pre-compile or compute those shaders, right? So of course, when you reload those sections in Callisto Protocol that you would already have played, provided you haven't updated the driver, uninstalled the game, deleted the shader cache, the game should run smooth. You shouldn't have those stutters. That's generally how this works. But of course, that shouldn't be normal. The game is technically unplayable for somebody playing this for the very first time. You shouldn't have to do the little brother cheat code where you get your little brother to play through the game first, and then you play through the game later without any of the micro stutters. This should just be something solved at the beginning. I think the best way to describe how this works is I'm actually going to load up the PS3 emulator. I've got GTA 5 running because guess what? The game is so old at this point that you can emulate it on PC just fine, it seems. Now, what I want to show you here specifically is the shader compilation that's happening. So in the intro section of the game, look at every time something new happens, you start to see a texture being taken in or out, or something weird, a graphical oddity shows up. That's the shader being compiled and then put into place as we're playing the game. This is done asynchronously through the Vulkan Graphic API, as far as I understand. You can even see in this section when I'm aiming the firearm as Michael and I'm firing the gun, the first shot glitches the actual graphics for the game, but right after that, every single shot is delivered perfectly. That's because the first time you witness the gun being fired, you have to compile that shader. Then after that, you shouldn't have to because the shader has already been compiled in the first place. And of course, this will permeate throughout the entire game, throughout your first playthrough. It isn't until the second playthrough that these things completely iron themselves out. The first time you see something in these games, shaders have to be compiled. Now, since then, Callisto Protocol developers have actually issued a patch, but I found one fix that could actually work. So for a lot of people who are having issues like this, it seems as though you can open up your PC settings, you can go to the app data, local, Callisto Protocol, saved config, Windows, no editor directory, open up the engine INI file, and add these commands to it. So create shaders on load, allow occlusion queries, shader optimize, and once you've gotten all these entered, you can save this document, run the game. It'll actually force the engine to compile those shaders ahead of time, so you don't have to do this step throughout the game and cause it to be stuttery. Now again, I don't own the game on PC, but if this fixes it, this might be something you should look into. Now I've also heard the game has CPU limitations, but I can't really comment on that. I'm really going on with what Digital Foundry is saying. So I wanted to make this video to really talk about why these PC ports are actually so bad, and why this problem constantly continues to persist. I wondered to myself the entire time, if it was so easy to fix, why don't we have this fix available? And unfortunately, it's just not that simple, it seems. But again, maybe things can change, maybe things will get better. Now, I've asked myself a million times, can this get any better? Why do we have to suffer through this as PC gamers? And honestly, given the fact that some of these engines, it seems, can allow you to pre-calculate these things before you get into the game, I don't know why this isn't at least an option. I would rather wait 15 minutes. I'll make myself some G Fuel, I'll walk away, dude, I'll do something else. Come back to the game and it be buttery smooth. That's something that I would prefer. You know, for somebody that does actually enjoy this game, it's a shame to see it getting absolutely review bombed because of actual technical issues that it has. And of course, I'm not defending this game in that capacity. The developer should have done what they could to make sure this issue was mitigated, because this is something that could not have slipped through quality control in any capacity. The developers knew this was going to be an issue. They released the game. They had a whole day one embargo and everything. They knew for a lot of people that were buying this game on the PC, they were going to have some severe issues. And had they been honest about it, had they provided something to it, honestly, if that fix that I showed you a few minutes ago could fix the actual problems present in the game, why couldn't they have at least allowed the option, or have set that by default for plenty of people? I would wager most people would wait 10 minutes for a game to warm up and play it without any issues than having their first entire experience completely tainted by absolute stutter problems. But you know what, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just this that has the issues. If you want to look at how shaders work even closely, load up an emulator like RPCS3. It'll basically force you to compile shaders beforehand, or you can do something which is known as asynchronous shader loading, which in emulators, basically you can actually see the game not load in anything. You can actually see it load in shaders on the fly. It's a rather interesting topic to get into, and one thing that we can jump around. But when it comes to shaders, when it comes to these situations, this is why a lot of these PC games, notably Unreal Engine 4 titles, have these severe issues. It's one of the reasons why I don't buy Unreal Engine games on PC, and I don't experience them for the first time on the PC because of these issues. I don't want my first time playing the game to be loaded with stutters, regardless of whatever hardware that I use. That's why. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Callisto Protocol isn't even the best game when you compare it to, like, Dead Space 2. Obviously, I've learned that, keeping my expectations very low is very important in today's day and age when it comes to video gaming. This game, while it's nice, lacks a lot of the charm that I think Dead Space 2 had, a lot of that strategic combat that I was talking about earlier. But overall, is the game horrible? No, I think it's probably one of my most favorite games this year, simply because I'm a huge fan of survival horror, and I'm a pretty big fan of, like, space, sci-fi scenarios, and hey, I like the visuals. They immerse me pretty hard into it. I'm a sucker for immersive HUD, so that's pretty much where I'm sitting at. I'm sorry if this whole video was kind of a mess. I wanted to really teach you guys about something that I was researching for, honestly, the past few months. But I guess I had a perfect vessel to deliver this information in. Callisto Protocol is a fucking dog shit mess right now on PC. And unfortunately, it's this that will be remembered when this game is recalled back on into, right? It's going to be the one memory that sticks out, sadly. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am